My name is Arvind Shivaramakrishnan. I am the CIO at Apollo Hospitals. And this session is going to be identity, a new perimeter, when borderless, hybrid, cloud enable, and extending. So, session on identity and demystifying identity. I have three fantastic friends with me. So I have Siddharth, who is the CEO of Asia Pacific One Cosmos.
Very good afternoon, everyone.
I have with me Vikas Malhotra, who's the country manager, India and SAARC of LastPass.
Hi, good afternoon.
And I have the privilege of having with us the CEO of the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence of NASSCOM, Dr. Sriram. So I'll get started first with demystifying identity. So, and this probably I'm going to sound super philosophical. So what is identity and what are we trying to do here is possibly my first thing. So Vikas, thought a question to you in terms of between identity and individuality. How do you define them? And after you define it, because the name sounds so familiar, what is it that we are missing here?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the great question, Arvind. So between identity and individual thing, I think the lines are getting really blurred, right? An individual today is more recognized by his mobile number. Today, if my mobile number has become my identity, fortunately or unfortunately, that's how the digital explosion that's what it's doing. Coming to the organization part of it, the identity, today everyone is talking about and embarking on the zero trust journey. And identity certainly plays a critical role over there. In fact, Mandiant's recent 2023 report clearly calls out identity stolen is identity lost. That's their 2023 prediction towards identity. And the missing part over here when it comes to security leaders trying to fix the gap from an identity perspective is not being able to, or probably for whatever reason, I won't say not being able to, but having a holistic view of the IT infrastructure in terms of how and what needs to be protected. And I'll try to simply support it with an example. Let's look at the entire horizon of applications that we have in an organization, depending on the IT maturity, depending on the security maturity. On one end, we have certain applications which every employee uses on a day-to-day basis, right? Every employee of the organization has to use, and the CIOs and the CISOs organization is aware of that. They approve for it, and they take care of it. They spend money, they take care of it, and they manage it end to end. On the other end, we have some very critical infrastructure, some critical applications or sensitive users whose data needs to be protected, and we bring in PAM solutions that for a very select organizations, select applications. In between this entire horizon, there's a larger I would say a larger gap that is left out with shadow IT applications. We all know, right? There are departmental organization applications which they can buy. The CISO only approves it, but in the day-to-day life does not actually manage it, does not actually run. And look at the legacy applications which for some technology reasons, for some heavy lifting, is not being tied to the SSO because it is not for every employee. Now, these continue to be big intrusion points for the threat actors. They know where they have to go, and unfortunately, even if it's a departmental breach, let's say somebody was to come through a shadow IT application, unfortunately, a CISO cannot get away by saying it's that department's problem. Who's in the line of fire? It's a CISO who's line of fire. So I think that is a very big gap when it comes to managing the identity.
I don't know what you're talking about in shadow IT, you know. Our enterprises are so well disciplined that we've not even heard that. In a world in humanity where you're talking that, you know, humanity, we need to trust each other, we sit here advocating principles of zero trust. So I'm going to leave that question open to all of us to think of. But in that context, I'm going to come to you, Vikas. Between identity and sorry, Siddharth. I'm sorry, Siddharth. Between identity and association with personality, and rightly as Vikas said, you know, you're gonna start having that open up into various threats and all of that. So, so associating an identity to a personality, and thereby the whole space of cybersecurity and privacy. Tell us more about it.
So I think I'm probably going to answer it a little bit differently, right? So going back to your first philosophical question, I want to give a philosophical answer to it. Very recently, I was in Manila on a panel discussion, and one of the panelists very nicely put it, saying that identity is the key to your dignity. Very, very powerful statement if you think about it, right? And I don't think we back here in India are thinking about it that way until very recently now, with probably the privacy bill coming out. We are moving in that direction where we understand, we realize that the information that we have as a employee or as a consumer, how critical it is to us, right? So I think that's the starting point to really understand and appreciate, be respectful of each other's identity. And then we come into how do we manage the gap that exists today between the real world identity of the person and the digital identity of the person, right? Um, there are products or tools available which manage, but they are really focused around how to manage the digital identity of an individual, right? And that's the mind shift that needs to happen, where you're saying that the person who's logging into a application, whether irrespective of whether it's an employee or a customer, all right, has to prove himself, right? Going back to what Vikas said around zero trust, right? So prove who you are before you are able to access that information. That's number one. Number two is, when you want to share any part of your identity, or what's popularly known as PII information, has to be through consent. I think the previous panel, we all heard that the control of the identity or the information or the data, the ownership lies with the user, right? And I think those are some fundamental questions or understanding that all of us need to have when we start addressing this and eventually bring it down into tools and systems that we want to put in place.
Thanks, Siddharth. Dr. Sriram, I'm going to come to you next in terms of, your thoughts in terms of how we see this as a cultural mindset. And I'll probably frame it for you. And I represent the healthcare sector, I work for a hospital chain. And when we come to you and ask for help, support, or even sometimes with authority, cross question a lot of things, do you really see that people understand the definition of identity? And as the Center of Excellence in NASCOM and being one of the champions at cybersecurity, how do you see and how do you advise people?
Oh, thanks, Arvind. Yeah, for the question. Usually, first of all, to clarify, I'm part of DSCI. It's of course an ASCOM body, but it's the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence in Hyderabad. Just like you have here presence there, we have presence in Hyderabad there. Okay, so coming to this rather interesting question, I like the way really you're running this panel rather than getting into some of these technical tools and all these kinds of things. So identity has been, I mean, taken for granted or been misunderstood in a sense. Identity is sameness, individuality is difference. How is it sameness? Yeah, identity is sameness because you would like to think of saying that only some set of groups are allowed to access my system. Say customers are allowed to access, or system administrators are allowed these kinds of privileges or so. So there are groups that you have in mind, okay? And it becomes very critical that you do that. Now, because that's what drives the kind of things that you will allow them to do and all. And a breach of that, if you see many of the breaches that happen, is because somebody compromised that, either in ransomware or somewhere else, you would see that somebody compromised that. So that is there. Now, why is it important to treat it make it extremely critical is because supposing you were in some alien country, okay, then your passport is very valuable to you, okay, identity, okay, without that, the people really do not know who you are and what you may be up to. You become very difficult and dangerous also, maybe land in situations, right? So that is your passport to, I mean, doing things that you wish to do in a safe manner, okay? So luckily now the definitions are getting, I mean, tighter or very well, they are being clarified, well-defined ones are coming out. So if you take even the NIST standards and the evolution of that, you had NIST 1800, then you have NIST, if now just floated for reference, is that floated for comments is SP 863, I think, okay, in which an entire framework is being brought out. So what happened now in the meantime, because of the pandemic and other things, this gained a lot of importance, and in a distributed perimeter-less world and all these things, identity began, I mean, they started defining identity as the new perimeter, but that's not quite right. It means that if someone breaches that perimeter, he's free to do whatever he wants. Identity is at the core. So you talk nowadays about mesh architectures and all these things wherein you have entire cybersecurity built around identities and access. So this is the thing. When it comes to that individuality and all, just to elaborate on that point, you see the way people define also. Say they say customer segmentation. That means the market, you have defined a certain market and cut it into segments. Nothing to do with cybersecurity. You cut it into segments. Now, what is the ultimate segmentation? Ultimate segmentation is personalization. You are one. Okay, that means groups, segment until the point where you are a one individual one. So you have personalized service, you have personalized stuff happening. Okay, and that is what people want, and that's why they are investing lots of money to understand your personal tastes, preferences, your personal identity and information. That is extremely crucial. Okay, so these are the thoughts that I'd leave you with. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Sriram. I'm going to come next to both of you, Vikas and Siddharth. Now, when you're providing solutions, and many a times, and again, I'm going to give our enterprise example here. We look at obviously identity management, and then we look at role, and then we say role-based security, and that keeps changing. And in between all of this, we have statutory auditors, and life is fun. But when you're looking at a solution, tell us in terms of, what is the journey of this solution? What is the journey to maturity? How do you approach this in a right manner so that you're actually achieving the overall intention of identity protection? But what is that journey of maturity? Because we'll start with you and then Siddharth.
Sure. So I'll bring this completely from my perspective, Siddharth, right? From our perspective, from what we are hearing in the market. Now, depending on the organization, and as I mentioned earlier, from the technology maturity, different organizations have different building blocks to their technology maturity, to the IT maturity, especially in the identity stack. There are certain organizations who, for reasons maybe not security so much, but compliance at times, embark on certain technologies more from an audit perspective than actually from a security perspective, without knowing what kind of a new animal they are bringing in. But the ideal way, the right way is, what I would say is, start with the fundamentals. And when we are talking about the fundamentals and we are talking about the threat actors' intrusion into your system, enough and more industry reports are pointing towards the fact that it's the human errors that are creating these intrusion points. What we are worried about is immediately what happens after the intrusion. So here's a safe in my house, I want to protect the safe. Here's another jewelry in my house on this side, I want to protect that. But nobody is talking about protecting the main door, right? I'm just trying to draw some analogy that when I say trying to protect the main door, am I securing every bit of application, whether used, unused, less users, more users, critical users, non-critical users? Because for a threat actor, they have to come in the organization. They will not look at the maturity of the application or the sensitivity of the user. They are looking at intruding in. They are looking at one mistake to be made, which 82% of the time are human errors, and out of that, close to 65% are weak, compromised, reused credentials. So that's the first part. So I would say bring in a robust password manager, if I may say so, without sounding very salesy here, that I would say that secure the world which you can behind an encrypted vault. After that, start building up your SSO stack, your PAM stacks, but at the same time, now there are certain organizations who have already done this. As I said, PAM one side, SSO on the other side, and then bringing in an authentication layer. But what's left out is the gap that I mentioned about was in this. So when we say maturity, first look at from the attack surface at how a threat actor is thinking. They want to get in, they will come after your employees. They will come after, and by the way, they are not using simple permutations and combinations. They are using advanced algorithm to crack a password. Any password, let it be 15 characters. If it has your personal details, they will crack it in few seconds. That's how they operate. And they will be in there. And that's the entry point they need. So this is what I believe. Start off securing with the password managers, your SSO identity provider, or probably we are talking about the Active Directory integration and the privileged access management, the PAM solution. So all this can go in parallel, but without ignoring the critical credential layer. That's my take.
So because what I've learned now is stop articulating or stop encouraging these machine learning and artificial intelligence enthusiasts because they're cracking all our passwords.
It really depends on how we manage that, how we look at that, but there is certainly some bit of reality to this. I mean, we can't really stop it these days, but we really need to be a little more focused.
Siddharth, your take on this, and also comment to me in terms of the journey of this solution.
Yep, absolutely right. Maybe the solution I'll really come at the end, right? Because I don't think that's a core agenda over here, right? But just on a lighter note, maybe just do away with passwords, right? I mean, just go passwordless. But on a serious note, right? I think what is also important when you start off a journey in a organization, right? And I've been part of organizations which have been small to medium size to almost enterprise, right? What is important is to understand there are three things that matter in a organization that touches every aspect: people, process, and tools, right? You always are going to have people in any organizations. You can't do without it, right? What messes up is the challenge between, or the friction between, the process and the tools. A lot of places we've seen where tools are bought in without processes, and you expect the tools to be like a magic wand, where you feel that the moment you install, configure it, it's going to solve all your problems. But invariably, you will always fail, right? Why? Because you don't have a process. So the way it should work is that you first need to introduce a process, even if it is manual to start with, right? You create the manual process, you make it work, and then you automate it by bringing in the tool, right? The moment you do that, you are then building for scale. You're leaving out gaps. You're leaving out friction potentially, because now you've been able to think through, right? And that's where then you come down a level down to identity and access management, right? Why identity and access management has been so complex is because it's always a journey, right? Because again, it touches every aspect of the organization, right? From provisioning of an employee when the person joins in, to giving him access, to giving him fine-grained entitlements in terms of what they are able to do or not able to do. And finally, whether they go on long leave or leave the organization, how you manage it, right? But if you don't have processes defined, you implement an IAM solution in place, it's going to miserably fail. And that's why a lot of organizations complain that, oh, we implemented, but it never worked, right? I mean, but the truth is that did you even have your processes defined, right? So that's very important. In the morning, we had a very senior gentleman from a large GSI, global GSI, come in, and he was talking about that I manage incident responses for enterprise and the government and the defense, etc., right? And he said that, well, product is great, Sid, but what do you rely on? And I like, the source of truth for us is AD. I am not going to manage the identity. You as a customer need to manage that piece of it. So I'm going to rely on your AD to tell me if the user should be authenticated or not. He said, well, the problem is that employees are leaving the organization, but they are still active in the AD. He said, well, the unfortunate answer that I have to give is that he will get authenticated, because the source of truth for us is that single point, right? And he said, yeah, but that's something that you need to figure out. I said, that's unfortunately, again, not my problem, right? Because I am trying to solve a different kind of a problem that's at hand, right? And that's where the whole challenge that is there in front of us is that how do we manage that, right? So I think the goal should be to think through, and IAM is always a journey, right? You cannot go in with a big bang approach. You start off small, you bring in applications, you bring in users, create adoption, and from there on, you keep expanding the landscape within the organization, right? So that's the way to go. And of course, when it comes, eventually there's a solution, right? I mean, what we are preaching or educating the masses today for the last 1.5 year is that there is no identity and access management today. Why? Because there is no association of the real world identity to the digital identity, right? So think about it, right? I mean, there's no identity in IAM. So that's the problem that we are trying to solve today by associating the real world identity to the digital identity, and that's where the journey starts. And because now you've brought in that association, you could use other form factors to really make the passwords go away, right? So you don't need passwords anymore. So imagine a journey or your experience as a user where you don't need to remember a username, or if the organization had decided to go from 8 characters to 16 characters, you are still able to manage it. And from a user experience standpoint, it's just seamless and frictionless.
Siddharth, that I I picked up a couple of words. Passwordless, make the password go away. And again, I really don't know what you're talking about, because for years we've been passwordless and making the password go away, because we all know that the SA password of every SQL server is SA, and the Windows NT password for every server is administrator password. And making the password become frictionless is so easy, because we have yellow stickies on every workstation neatly documenting the username and the password. And that's really how most enterprises do. Dr. Sriram, in terms of cyber security now, have we just compromised our weakest link and the last mile? How do you see this as part of the COE and cyber security, and really literally the last mile that's being fundamentally compromised?
So whether it's the last mile or you flip it around and call it the first mile of access, or in any way, because in zero trust architectures, the principle is zero trust. Everything needs to be validated and verified, right? So that is there. These models are certainly evolving. Now, to all the points made here, there are significant strides being made in behavioral biometrics, in which that aspect what you talked about, from identity to individuality, individual things come in. So I was so happy to see one startup actually give a challenge. In the sense, they'll give prize money. They'll give you the login and the password, okay? And you try to log in, it won't. Only when the right person logs in, login name, password, it will go in, because it takes into account some 70, 80 parameters, in which, like the speed of typing, what do you use, IP address, so many other things in order to log in and then do that. Otherwise, you have situations like what I saw in one book on e-commerce, that the heading of the chapter was, this is a cartoon in which a wife is holding a credit card bill and asking the husband who is standing in the other room, saying, honey, did you buy a Rolls Royce in China? Okay. Suddenly he's been compromised, and on his credit card somebody bought a Rolls Royce. So these kind of things happen, and there are compromises all over. And there is no stopping digitalization. It's going into metaverse and all, where you have avatars and all, where not even regulations are defined there, right? So it may make sense to sort of adopt the current world's behaviors there for those avatars and all. Supposing someone impersonates somebody else and then goes and does havoc or something else. So in that manner, there are solutions, since you mentioned cybersecurity problem, blockchain-based solutions, or as I mentioned, mesh architectures, zero trust architectures, okay, and user entity behavioral analysis. All these are evolving fields, and standards are keeping pace there. As I just mentioned that NIST standards are coming out, NIST SP 863 and NIST 1800, which is existing one, and SP 803 is the new one that they are floating now. So it has a whole set of things defined around identity, the architectures, the distributed architectures, everything around identity. So it no longer will be that whole castle and moat kind of a model wherein you have access at one point work, because you're essentially living in a distributed world. Everything is distributed, right? So there have to be new architectural models that have to evolve, and they are evolving. And security measures for that also are evolving. A lot of material there. We'll be very happy to hold a workshop with experts and all on those for those who are interested. And I mean, I'm glad that many of the IDAM solutions and all are now adopting AI, ML and all that. Okay. Plus the traditional ones will also work, like LastPass. I mean, all these password managers and all these things. It has to be bolstered with a lot more.
I'll put the next question to you again, sir. Now, getting on from identity to privacy and privacy to identity, obviously, the whole idea of privacy is to maintain identity. So, with the new proposed digital PDP bill, your thoughts in terms of its seriousness and robustness to protect identity. What do you think are the best aspects of it in this proposed bill?
So, see, privacy, essentially, the way it's defined and all, it's of course defined to give, I mean, protect personally identifiable information and the compromises thereof, and all these things which are pretty rampant nowadays. Probably a mobile phone app which is there siphoning off a lot of data, which can be used, or it is treated as something that is very, very personal and your property and cannot be given out without your consent. So, cyber security and privacy are like cousins. Okay, both of them feed off each other, and as privacy laws increase in the country, cyber security, I mean, in many countries, privacy needs to really go. I mean, cyber security really needs to go up, and so that's a given. So the idea of protecting data, and especially personal data, which is considered very, very critical, around which laws and what you call penalties and all those are being imposed for the loss of it, is deemed as the top epitome of your protection in data protection. Okay? Because if that is compromised, everything else is compromised. Coming to the other mechanisms and all means by which they do, for example, whether banks are there or e-commerce companies by which they protect that the privacy, the data which is there. That is the first one that the regulatory people will whack you on if you lose personal data. So, to your question, how strong that is going, this is the first step. It's in a welcome step. It is really welcome. It's a step in the right direction. Is that enough? I think it will undergo changes over the years. Okay, even in US, for example, they float a law. Several times it has so happened that public interest litigations have caused the law to change. Okay, so those are also one of the roots of laws changing, not merely people gathering data and doing stuff. GDPR also. So in that manner, it took a lot of time to develop into the current bill which is there. But in India, I guess it is much faster. So because they've already been talking about it, and it's going in a faster manner. There are concerns there, a lot of concerns. I mean, for example, it is focused on only on digital data and not on all the other forms of data. It is silent on those. So in that manner, this DSCI has given a bunch of recommendations because they've put it out for comments, and DSCI is preparing all this based on inputs gathered as well as the earlier recommendations. It is giving all its inputs, but a privacy bill is definitely a step in the right direction. Not having it is really not an option. And after that, how it will improve and evolve is the question number 2. Okay. Yeah.
Siddharth, your company is headquartered in the United States, and you see privacy and identity protection in terms of solution and their corresponding compliance to the laws of the land. And since you're operating in multiple countries across, compare the current privacy bill in terms of its, again, strengths and weaknesses as you see between outside and what's being proposed here. And what's going to be the difficulty for for people in this country, for enterprises in this country to actually start following those rules. We're kind of pretty excited. There's a bill come out. I don't think anybody understands what's slapping us yet.
No, I think a great question. Puts me in a spot a little bit, but nevertheless, I can definitely share what we are seeing globally, right? If you personally ask me, it might have been a lot easier to maybe look something like at a GDPR and try and see and localize it over here in terms of what applies, right? We've seen, as the gentleman from the previous panel indicated, that we potentially come out with the 4th version of it, right? Very interestingly, when the last one got tabled, a PSU undertaking came out saying that they are going to monetize the PII information publicly and sell it, right? I mean, so that indicates the magnitude of problem, and that PSU is a pretty large one, right? They probably, I would say, potentially have, if not more than close to a billion people data with them, right? So there's a lot of lack of understanding here. So I don't think the bill by itself is going to do the job for us. I think a lot of education is going to be required, right? And especially like even the way Sir has indicated that if it's only related to digital data, it doesn't really solve the problem, right? So I think we'll have to undergo more iterations before we really bring in that understanding of why it is so important for every enterprise or business that is collecting PII information to be aligned. And when we talk to customers, right, I think outside of BFSI, and due credit to RBI with the way they have managed it, right, is a lot of other places it's extremely free flowing. People do not understand it. Customers don't understand it. The value that a PII information holds. So it's going to take a little bit of time, if you personally ask me, right? The only thing that when we say we are a SaaS company, they really get scared. They're like, no, how the PI information is going to sit on the cloud, right? But when we start explaining to them that why we are on the cloud, what we are doing, how we meet the privacy requirements, how we are even compliant with something like a GDPR, which at least in today's world is one of the probably most stringent privacy laws, right? Is where then the understanding and the appreciation of the architecture comes into play, and like, okay, now we understand, okay, we are probably open to more discussion, right? And for us today, if we have one of the largest bank being a customer, which is sitting on the cloud with us, right, should give an understanding of the capability around it, right? So that's very important.
Because Siddharth told us about a SaaS solution, and the moment you put it there, there's fear around it. So I really need to ask you now a technical question, because if I don't ask a technical question in a panel, then my credentials as a CIO starts getting questioned. So I have to ask you this. LastPass, very well-known solution, very comfortable saying it's an industry standard itself. Now when things come like the right to be forgotten, where somebody requests for their information to be forgotten, erased, or all of that, and with enterprises embarking on password keeping solutions and the cert regulations around kind of almost mandating password keeping, how do you convince enterprises that the technology architecture for this is actually protecting privacy and it's not by itself a loophole to privacy?
Right. Thanks, Arvind. Thanks for bringing up that technical question, but which which I'll certainly not answer very technically for sure. When we started our India operations for LastPass, so LastPass has been the product in existence for 15 years now, right? Doing exceedingly well in whole of North America, EMEA, Australia, and one of the reason there is stringent laws and this respective cert or cert equal kind of authorities guidelines, right? There has been, and this somewhere ties into your question earlier that you had put to Siddharth, that how is it that organizations, so initially organizations do grapple with it, they will grapple with it, but they will have to make peace with it. When we were starting our India operations, it took us some time, and I was getting restless that when are we going to have our servers in India? Because that was the first question that everybody would ask me, either ask me genuinely or kind of straight away discourage me, right? That you don't have servers in India, you can't sell in India. Fair enough. And by that time, we had already acquired 50 customers in India, which we also did not know. People went to our e-com website, downloaded, somebody downloaded 10 licenses, 50, 100, like that. The business had started. When I was checking with my legal team and I was on one of the calls, they were going in with the existing IT Act, the proposed data protection bill then, which got scrapped. And I think they spent a month or two, legal people from our team, to say that, yes, this is something that we can now go and enter India, right? We can start off with this. Coming to the question very specifically, what I'm asked is, if I was to put my identity, which is my username and a password, in your vault, and what if there is an issue with the vault itself? What if there's a threat actor in the vault itself, right? Is my identity getting compromised? Are my passwords there? So that's where probably I'll bring in some bit of technicality. We brought in something called as a zero knowledge architecture. Zero knowledge architecture is that the decryption, everything lies in the encrypted form, whether it's your passwords, usernames, your notes, your vaccination certificates, anything. It is only decrypted at the user's device level with the master key or the authenticator that we gave. So even if a threat actor was to go inside the vault, they see nothing. Nothing as in, it's like wherever we come, there's nothing that can go out from there. So that's probably my submission to the question that you have asked, in terms of LastPass being a repository of the identity of so many people, millions of paid customers, but more than that, the free users. Today, the number of downloads that LastPass has, the password managers has in all these countries is phenomenal. So it's like, to that extent, this zero knowledge architecture comes in. Did I kind of answer your technical question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Vikas, for that. And now for the last question for all of us here. The title of this thing is When is Borderless? And with identity. So if you were the Brahma of everything that relates to identity management, what is that single thing that you're going to expect to make identity borderless and secure?
I think I can start off. We can start off from there.
He wants to put, he's being Brahma, he pushed it to you. Okay. Siddhartha.
No, answer is very simple, right? I mean, it's when you go passwordless is when it becomes borderless, right? Because effectively you can then make, on a serious note, right? For us, everything that we do, whether it's in form of security, whether it's in form of privacy, the core focus for us is around identity, right? How do you protect it? How do you build it in terms of privacy by design, right? And then use that capability as a form of authentication is more of a byproduct. But what you're giving at the end of the day to the business or the consumer is a great experience as well. And that great experience with that singular identity, you are able to then seamlessly flow vertically and horizontally, which effectively, in some sense, is borderless.
I would say on the passwordless part of it, passwordless being equal to borderless. Bill Gates predicted in 2004 the death of passwords. He went out to the media and said the passwords will die in 2004, and Microsoft is working towards it. We are in 2022, right? And I'm sure you being a security leader, and with the security leader sitting here, nobody can see that at least in this year or next year, they will have their organization 100% passwordless. Forget the organization, even as individuals, we might have some grocery shopping authenticating me through a OTP, that they have said, okay, no password, we are making it simple for you, make it OTP driven. So now your name does not exist, you are a mobile number, you will get a OTP, and with the SIM cloning and phone cloning these days, that has a different risk. So I'll not touch upon that. Passwords, the way I look at it, they also have something called as a Lindy effect. Lindy effect is something that if something is in existence for quite some time, which is 1960s in this case, is likely to stay for very long. By all estimates and calculations, what the security leaders think is 2040, until 2040, we will not have passwordless world. But yes, If we were to flip it over and say less passwords, passwordless equal to less password, that if my user is typing in least number of passwords on a given day, but still accessing more applications. So all the applications are still having a password, but they are being accessed in a way, whether through a vault or through an authenticator or through a SSO or wherever, that a user's cognitive burden is not challenged. And at the same time, the operational burden on IT of password reset requests and all such things is not going ahead. I think that's a journey we should be looking at, that how do we minimize passwords? Thinking of it, the buzzword passwordless, and I'll be passwordless by 2023. If the boardroom is telling that, then please challenge them back. It's not going to happen. We are going to start off with less passwords for sure.
In fact, our users are very cooperative when we say passwordless. They want us to remove that login screen only. Dr. Sriram, your final words on identity, security, and as a center of excellence. How are you seeing all of this come together for India?
Yes, yes. So on the taking off from the earlier comment, I would tackle this problem at an architectural level, not merely go down to passwords, which is one component of it. Okay. So there is an entire architecture and standards. Okay. So the way we see it going down for India is that of tightening the laws, regulations, number one, okay, which are going to come out both in the form of data protection bill as well as the new cyber law frameworks that's going to come out, and actually enforcing, law enforcement also. So that is there, because currently the conviction rate of crime is very low. So that is one thing, and you would need to do that with a variety of means, forensic tools and all that. The second thing is standards. Standards compliant architectures and tools, interoperability, everything included. Okay. So that is there. So the architectural approach would really, which especially in the context of this discussion, which is identity and access management. So there are entire architectures built around identity and individual. So that would really change things and usher in the new era wherein this is borderless, perimeterless, and all of these things. BYOD, any device, anyone, anywhere, and also a bit of future like metaverse and all this, where there are avatars and all of these things which are there, they're coming up. So that would bring in. So these kinds of architectures and all these technologies supporting it in various aspects to fit into those architectures and all, then we are good to go. Okay. So technology evolution in terms of AI, ML, all that is happening, okay, and different types of flavors of technology which make it seamless and transparent for the users, so that there is security by design and privacy by design, not retrofitted it later in. So that is there. And then the culture and the training. So one should view security as something natural and not something that is bolted on or unnatural. Similar way as you take any normal natural entity like a human body. Okay, you see white blood cells and all of these things which are very natural. Security is inbuilt. It is not something added on or bolted on later, right? So with that, this is mine. I guess that sums it up. That is the direction in which we want to go.
Comment on security being natural and the human body comment makes me close up saying this is like an immune system for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Keeping that immune system secure and doing it by design is really what is going to make identity secure, borderless, because it's going to be prevalent everywhere, and data being prevalent everywhere in terms of what we do and what we have to do, necessarily it goes borderless. So that really brings us to a close for this session. Thank you very much for being a patient audience. Niharika, over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have 1 minute and 56 seconds. Yes, you have.
Yeah. So we are working on IoT standards and many things that we've come out with guidelines, best practices, and just to navigate the standards, we have to write one document on that. In the past 3 years itself, there were some 6 standards surrounding IoT which have come out around the world. I'm talking about. Okay, so this is going to be very much prevalent, and privacy and all were for individuals. Okay, individuality and all this. Now, coming to the digital world and all, how an organization protects its assets and the cyber security of it, identity of devices is very important. Okay, it may not be covered in the PDP bill itself per se, but identity of devices is extremely important for the cybersecurity world, and in general in cybersecurity where it can have so many things compromised. So that's a whole different topic of identity, which is important as you get waves of, let's say, 5G and all coming in. There could be a rogue device is taking over, and there are so many other problems. For example, the sensors are there, right? So sensors which convey data. Now someone has spoofed it, so that supposing a boiler is there, temperature is rising, he says it's all normal, or when there is carbon monoxide, he says there is no carbon monoxide, something like that. So it can cause very, very big dangers. It can be very dangerous even in cars or automotive security. We are writing one paper on that. So what happens is there some things are really complex because those sensors and all, they don't have the battery capacity or something to do encryption and all those kinds of things, right? So there are lightweight encryption protocols and all coming. So there are, again, as I said, architectural solutions there come into picture, that what exactly are you doing, SASE, so many other architectures are there. So zero trust and many of these architectures, they don't necessarily cater only to human beings and all that, they are across. So there are many solutions coming out there also. So I'd be very pleased to discuss with you because entire frameworks are there for IoT security. Okay.
I'm also given to understand that the government is looking at bringing some more guidelines in the formats of bills later on in terms of such industrial automation and identity protection, and also slowly getting on to the non-digital part of the identity. So all of them will come together, because you're right, industrial automation is a very big part of identity and what gets managed, not just personal, but that could imply personal. So I believe those are happening, but I think it's going to take some time for us to graduate through all these.